guess for starters, we'd like to welcome everybody to it's actually 17 years that we've been doing a summit like this. And it's sponsored or brought together by the Watershed Council. I'm gonna turn this off so it doesn't. It's sponsored by the Watershed Council, and that was formed about 17 years ago also. The town and the village and the CLA wanted to get together so that we were all pulling in the same direction. And what we've done now, it used to be meet independently, but now we meet at the CLA meeting that everybody is really invited to. And so when we have our CLA meetings, there's people from the village, the town, and also the CLA at those meetings. Dave, our president, wanted me to remind everybody if you could sign the sign-in sheet there and put your emails, that really helps us out. So we got a pretty nice agenda, we think, and we're going to start it with Jimmy, who's going to give us a town report here.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jimmy Golub. I'm town board member and CLA liaison. I'm going to start out. Okay, hold on a second here. Okay, I'm going to start out about milfoil. Oh, before I do, today it's October 26th. It's a weekend. Those of you who don't know me, I'm a pumpkin farmer. I have to get back to my business, so I'm going to present and then I'm going to take off. So any questions I think are going to be at the end. And Kyle is here, our supervisor, who could probably answer anything I might have to say better than I can. So
Questions.
yeah, the questions are going to be at the end anyway. So first I want to talk about milfoil control. Okay. So this past year, by any measure, we had a phenomenal year for milfoil control. We used a higher dose of Priscillacor, and I've been on the board for 8 years. I think this is probably the best year for milfoil control. Very, very effective. Next year, we anticipate that we'll have more weeds than this year, but still have pretty good control. And then 2026 is the third year, we expect that there'll be some challenges, and that's where the harvester will come more into play. And we'll be anticipating that. We hope to have to be able to manage the harvester well and keep the weeds down. Okay, so this is okay. So lake health. The CLA has been involved in a lot of studies. I'm not looking at the same thing that you're looking at.
He's good at pumpkins, bad at technology.
I don't have water quality. No, maybe I changed the. So anyway, we're looking at reducing the nutrients and sediments that get into the lake. And I know Bob Crichton has been getting data on this, and it's coming from runoff, from tributaries, and septic systems. And we're measuring, trying to find out where the hot spots are and trying to mitigate that. Making less nutrients that come into the lake will make for a less hospitable environment for invasive weeds. So we're feeding the weeds now. We want to try to do the opposite. We acquired a new harvester this year. The old one served us well for 7 years, and we're currently in the process of trying to sell that. We would like it to stay local if possible. We got 85 loads this past year, which is pretty good. It probably wasn't milfoil we were getting mostly pondweed. Okay, here it is. Okay, so we got a cleaning station this year, and I just want to make everybody be aware that this did not cost the taxpayers a dime, or locally it didn't. We got that through, thanks to Lauren Lyons, who wrote the grant, and Al Sturpey's office. We were able to, it cost it $40,000. And the town has increased the compensation to the stewards, and we can't prove that we've prevented any invasive weeds from getting into the lake, but just having the presence of that unit there, excuse me, and having the stewards there shows that we're serious about invasive weeds. We're way ahead of most lakes around here. Let's see. We appreciate also the support that the village is. They're the ones that run the boat launch there, so we appreciate what they're doing. And Tom Tate is here. He's been very instrumental in that. And as we move forward, it's essential to remain vigilant in our efforts to prevent the introduction of weeds, invasive weeds, into our beautiful lake, and also protect the health. And your dedication and involvement are key to our success, and thank you all who contributed to this effort.
What's that, Jamie? Oh, he said 20% off pumpkins today.
End of the year sale.
Leftover corn.
So one of the things we try to present every year is what they call the rake toss results. And these really give us a lot of information about what's going on in terms of not just the invasive milfoil, but also the other vegetation in the lake. Because one of the things we want to make sure of is that these chemicals that we're using, and yellow here is the chemical we used to use. This is Renovate. And then Procelicor is the most recent chemical that we used. But we want to make sure that those chemicals aren't impacting the natural vegetation. And what a rake toss is exactly what it sounds like. They go to over 300 sites, they toss a rake, they bring it back onto the boat, and they count not just milfoil, but they count all the natural vegetation that we have, which is significant. So we have somewhere around 30 species of different grasses and weeds in the lake. And as you can see up here, that really stays pretty much 30 all the way across. So whatever we're doing with these chemicals is really very specific to just milfoil. Probably the most important numbers down here are the density numbers. And I like to, one of the things that Dave and I were talking about last night when we were looking at this is to remind everybody that milfoil in Cazenovia Lake is everywhere that it can be, okay? It's not that there's new sites that it can grow. And so it's everywhere that it can be, and then really it's just about density of the milfoil. And we're gonna, so these years, early years that we were treating with Renovate, we treated the north end first, then we treated the south end, so we were only treating half the lake, okay? And then we did every other year for a while, but then when we got to 2016, we said, gee, can we go another year where we're not treating? And the density went way up that year. I remember 2016 was probably the worst year we ever had on Cazenovia Lake that I can remember. And so now, fast forward to Procelicor, we really want to try to go 3 years with our treatments, okay? So this year was a treatment year. The lake was excellent. Just like Jimmy pointed out, it's probably not going to be quite as good next year. And then that third year, but the third year that we've done already, this is 29%, this is 54% when we tried to go 3 years with renovate. So it looks like we can probably, that third year won't be as great, but it won't be too bad. And Kyle Gilbert put these slides together for us, and it's really kind of visually a nice thing to see. This was before any treatment. These are all sites of milfoil, and the size of the dot is density. And you can see that the lake was not in very good shape in terms of milfoil. That's after the renovate treatment at the north end. South end was not treated. And in between, you get a little bit of dissipation of the chemical, and that helps work in the middle there a little bit. Here's when it was treated just at the south end. North end, it's starting to come back. This is 2011, a non-treatment year. Sorry about that. Treatment year here. It's Adam O'Neill. He knows what we're doing. 2013, a non-treatment year. Here's another renovate year. And you can see the density just, and then 2016, that's the one. Yeah, Adam, go away. And then 2017, we treated again. And I'm gonna go back if I can. Here's 2016. That was the third year, okay? And you can see the density that year was almost back like at the beginning before we had even treated. I am gonna answer. Adam, I'm at the summit. I'll call you back. Adam, I'm at the summit. I'll call you later. So let's go to some Priscilla Court years here. I think that's 21 is our first Priscilla Court treatment. And you can see in 21, it's really better than any of the treatments that we ever had with Renovate, okay? It is definitely a more effective chemical. It dissipates more quickly. It's less expensive. Here's 22 starting to come back. 23, again, 29% density there, but not nearly as bad as the third year with Renovate. And then here's 24, where we basically wipe it out again. And I think next up here is Tom Tate, Village Update.
Thank you, Sam. Good morning, everyone. I want to state, I think on behalf of the Watershed Council and the Lake Association, this is a spectacular turnout, so thank you all for being here. The Village of Cazenovia has 9 parks and green spaces that we oversee and maintain. Today, we're going to principally focus on Lakeside Park. Lakeside Park is the park with the boat launch and pavilions. It is a complex park. You can drive by and say, what a simple, beautiful little park, but it has a lot of roles that it plays in our community. Obviously, it's the only recognized public access for trailer boat launches. There are 16 spots that are available, split between residents and non-residents. And we have our new cleaning station. There are 25 rental racks for canoes and kayaks, and they sell out within hours in March, so they're very popular. Then we have the 2 softball fields. There's 2 picnic pavilions that have a capacity of 175 people and a playground for children. And all of this, there's only 60 spots in addition to those that are allocated for trucks and trailers, 60 spots for vehicles, maximum. Changes that we made this year, Jimmy talked about the dry boat cleaning station that was placed and still exists at Lakeside Park. we integrated a tag system. It started out with a serial number, but we had some conspiracy theorists who thought that the village was tracking their every move. So we've gone to a simple zip tie for that. And this has been very successful. The purpose of this, it gets affixed between the boat and the trailer. And if it's severed and missing, then we know they've been to another lake. If they return to Cazenovia and this is intact, it means the last lake they were on is Cazenovia Lake, therefore we can expedite their launch. It's worked beautifully. We spent a lot of time on policies and procedures for all of the parks within the village of Cazenovia, but probably most of our emphasis was on Lakeside Park. And I think that that's something we do on an ongoing basis, but I don't think it will be as robust in this off-season. We did have tighter restrictions on contractors that access Cazenovia Lake through the boat launch. In the past, it's been, you need to get on, get on. Now we want to know, where are you working? What's the duration of the project? What's the scope of the work? Is DEC involved? Is the town involved? We think that's important, not for the village so much, but for the town and certainly the Lake Association to understand what's going on around our lake. Because as we know, there seems to be an awful lot of construction all the time. We increased, rightfully so, the hourly rate. Jimmy referenced that for our boat launch stewards. There's 4 of them. All are returning for next year. They were woefully underpaid. It's a brutal job. You go from extreme boredom to pulling your hair out seemingly within a couple of hours. And then we developed more refined job description for them and our expectations of those stewards. They are not just looking at the boat launch. They might have questions about pavilion rental. They may have a lot of other things that pop up that they have to assist with. That's not ideal. We'd love them to focus just on the launch, but the reality is they have to multitask when they're down there, and I think they do a pretty good job with it. This has been an important component is, this year more than ever, we're taking people who apply to use the pavilions or the ball fields, and we're asking a lot more questions of them because we want to make sure that Lakeside Park is a good fit for them and they're a good fit for us. With only 60 parking spots, you can't accommodate every request. We had some that were 400 people for a corporate party. That's not a good fit for it. So this has worked out well with our office staff in terms of getting it so it works out well from a handicap accessibility, parking, lighting, and everything in between. The boat launch this year, from some of the statistics, you can see the village had 67, the town represented 273. This is residents. One resident may have 5 boats. This is just resident numbers. And then 263 for non-village or town of Cazenovia. We issued just 3 day passes this year. 2 contractors applied for permits, and then there were 2 special use permits, one for the electroshock boat and one for the Freshwater Institute. Most of the boats for the duration of the season arrived clean. This is something we really hammered on during the off season, and people took it very seriously. And now having, like Jimmy referenced, the boat cleaning station there, it just emphasizes to the community that we take the cleanliness of their boats entering Cazenovia Lake very seriously. Over 1,200 of the tags were used, but that doesn't mean there were 1,200 individual launches. Some of these larger boats, party barges, we had to combine 2 or 3 of these together to link the trailer with the boat. So, but we're going to continue this next year. This was a color that I picked, very attractive. We will not be doing the serial number next year. It will be a different colored zip ties. Interestingly enough, the numbers are less than 1% higher this year over last, but the day passes dropped 97%. We increased the fee from $10 to $30 because $10 just wasn't working economically. It didn't make any sense. And so most people opted to convert from a day pass to a seasonal pass, which is good. From a canoe and kayak standpoint, Lakeland Park, that's where the pier is, we have 12 slips there, 5 went to village, 7 went to non-resident. It's first come, first serve. And at Lakeside Park, of the 25 spots, 20 were village and town, and 5 were out of the area. Our goals for next year with the stewards, they're our last line of defense for any new invasive. They play a critically important role. We want to continue to work with them on best practices for thorough boat inspections and safe and efficient launches. We're going to consider signage. There's a lot of signs down there. We need to thin some of them out, but Dave and I feel that a sign that speaks to the invasives and the importance of them not bringing something in a bait bucket or a dry well is critically important, and a sign there when they stop to be checked in would be an effective means to get that message across. We're going to continue to review Lakeside Park use applications to make sure that the planned events are at a scale that we can accommodate, develop a better method for tracking in-office and at-launch data. I think we have to consider something that might be something that's scannable, and that we'd be able to review the data easier, and it will make it even more efficient to get people in and out of the lake. And then educate park visitors that Lakeside Park is a village-owned, village-maintained park. As beautiful as it is, it has limitations. And it is a privilege to have this park, and we believe, and I think all of you here, by your mere presence, agree that there has to be a perpetual sense of urgency towards the protection and preservation of Cazenovia Lake. Thank you. David?
No way.
He says I'm overly verbose.
7:21.
By the way, the bet we had between Jimmy and Tom, Jimmy won.
At least his phone didn't go off.
I know. True. I guess I don't have to give Adam any accolades during this presentation. So, anyway, I'm Bob, and I've been involved with the Lake Association for about 5 years, around late 2019, just in time for COVID to hit. But we implemented a 5-year plan, and what we were trying to do is put more structure around some of the projects and the work we were doing to document those things. And when we start obviously with a mission statement. The mission of the Lake Association is our lake, our legacy, keeping Cazenovia Lake healthy and useful for current and future generations to enjoy. Pretty simple, but sometimes not as easy as you would think to maintain that. When we look at a 5-year plan, there are 4 different items we looked at. Reduction of nutrients, what's coming into the lake so we can control that. Keep the lake healthy so we can enjoy it. And provide more education and information through various sources to the overall community. We feel the more people understand what's going on in the lake, the more knowledgeable they are. I see some heads nodding, so thank you, that's good to know. The more invested they're going to be in the lake. So there's no surprise, should be no surprises. And lastly, because we're a volunteer organization, we rely on people like yourselves for contributions to support the projects that we're going to talk about today in our fundraising efforts. And we want them to be community friendly, so that we have that really good relationship with the people around us that are supporting us. We look at specific projects. You've heard a lot about invasives, and we're going to talk more about it because we're just going to keep beating it because it's so important overall. We know what we have in the lake. Our goal is to prevent anything new coming in. Water quality is critical. There's historical information, the sediment at the bottom of the lake, runoff from farms, towns around the area, businesses, and also looking at obviously human waste from the septic side. But focus not just on the lake itself, but take a look at the whole watershed area. Sounds pretty basic, but it's also pretty hard to do because it's a pretty large area when you look at it. And lastly, I've been on the lake since 1991, and it's changed a lot. And one of the things that we work with municipalities on is how do we continue to improve the shoreline? With all the construction that goes on, there's a lot of potential for runoff. The more we control that, the better health of the lake, and also to support the enforcement of those rules and regulations as well. So collectively, with the village and the town, we looked at 10 different projects. We'll dive into about 3 of those, but the rest I wanted to list because I think sometimes there was always this misconception that we were just a treatment, funding organization, and hopefully you'll walk away with a better understanding of the different things we're working on. So the Lakeside or Lakeland Park swimming area, that's to reduce halves, so we don't have to close them down. Are there technologies there that we can use that will help that? The water sampling program is really looking at the makeup of the lake. It's the planktons, the invertebrates, and the fish in the lake. So the more we understand the populations, the better we can understand and predict what's going to happen in the future. We talked about community outreach, emails, mailings that most of you probably already get. We also have a community session at our farm with Jimmy. that's pretty effective. And Adam started, and I don't have to introduce Adam, everybody knows him now. And also with Dan, who's done a great job expanding that. I think we're much more successful in reaching a better cross-section of the population, excuse me, through that program. Septic inspection management, eventually sewers, we're not there yet. We've got a lot of work to do on the inspection side of things, and we'll work with the town on that going forward. And then we've completed 3 projects. The milfoil is an ongoing one. We've been very successful, we talked about with Priscillacor. What's the next technology? You know, we don't know what's out there, but there's gotta be something else that may be more cost effective or more efficient that we can use. And also the non-treatment years. How do we keep weed growth down overall? There was questions about the harvester and was it killing fish? So Dave Tyler, Tad Webster, and Jimmy went through and physically counted fish coming off the harvester. And what we found was a very small population, mostly of tiny fish, bluegills, and pumpkin seeds. And when, I think it's Bill, whoever's doing the fish study reports, you'll find out they're a very healthy population. So we've closed that and said it really has no impact at all on the fish population. And then we looked, for the fishermen, we looked at walleyes, because the state was funding some stocking programs a couple of years ago, and we wanted to know if it made sense to expand that. And what we made the determination was because reproduction rates are terrible on the lake for walleye, it wasn't worth investing in that. Otherwise, we'd have to keep doing it on an annual basis, and that's not cost effective if it can't sustain itself. So let's take a deeper dive into 3 of the projects. It's listed as number 10 only because we broke it out as a separate category from kind of being lumped in. It's clearly our top priority and has to be the focus for everyone going forward. Boat cleaning station we've talked about. We've implemented inspection programs at Willowbank as well as, excuse me, the Awera Point Homeowners Association. And we are pushing hard to reduce the number of unsupervised private boat launches, because we feel that this is an important part to control the weeds and fish that are invasive that come into the lake. How are we going to do that? There's a simple one down in DOT lot. Sounds simple, may not be simple getting their approval, but putting more stones down there so you can't launch power boats. We're not talking about kayaks, we're not talking about canoes, we're not talking about paddle boards. We love those, we all have them. We're talking about power boats that we need to have inspected and controlled, because that's where the invasives are going to come from, whether it's in the bilges or whether it's on the boats. And if we can do that, that'll stop some of those launches that take place off the DOT lot. We're going to work with the town. We've made some proposals and ideas to the town about eliminating private marinas until there's really no place for them. There's 2 public or commercial ones with Brewster and Willowbank. They're fine. They have inspection programs. Or utilize the stations that do the inspections, but the private ones are a problem.
Aware does also, they do a good job.
Yeah, and that's important, because really those 2 points, there's a lot of boats that come in, and the fact that they have now an inspection program going on is a really good thing. And then we'll continue to work with those 2 entities on improving the process, just as we talked about doing ours as well. And then we'll review the data, take a look at the frequency of how it's used, compare it to last year with the cleaning station, and make some recommendations on what to change. And we highlighted this down here about the diligence of preventing invasives. We spent $1.25 million since 2008 on milfoil. It's a lot of money. And it comes from obviously private donations. And if we allow things like hydrilla or gobies, which are fish, into the lake, that number is going to be significantly higher, because hydrilla grows in deeper water. There's not specific herbicides for it. And gobies, just go talk to people at Oneida Lake, and they'll tell you how it's changed the environment up there. It's dramatic. So we have to be diligent, otherwise we're fighting a real uphill battle. The other projects that we want to highlight is silt remediation. We've identified the flows coming into the lake. We piggybacked off the Cass College study that was done about 8 years ago, looking for major tributaries. We've sampled those annually for the last 5 years. The data kind of confirms what they found, at least for phosphorus. But we also do nitrogen, we do suspended solids, we also do specific conductants and chlorides coming in. And then we want to compare that to some of the work that Margo does with C-SLAP. and collecting data for the lake and see how that compares, if there's any trends at all there as well. Dam removal project, that'll be a video you'll see later, so I won't go into that. We worked with the DOT on the 92 and 20 culvert and had a significant improvement in the water coming down the hill. Excuse me. Check dams and also plantings to control erosion and silt coming into the lake, and that's closed. We want to take that same technologies and apply it now to some other places. For example, like East Lake Road, if you've driven down there, they did a lot of scraping of the ditches. That creates a lot of silt that potentially runs into the lake. And by putting some check dams in, like we did on Wright Road, as an example, which was really done well, in the culvert there that was just redone, we can see those same improvements on what's coming into the lake off those couple areas that are on East Lake Road. And I'm sure there's others as well, it's just happened to be very visible, excuse me, on what we saw there. Cost to do it's about $1,000 for the sampling. We spent about $100,000 plus so far on the dam removal project, mostly through state grants, some partial funding from the village as well as the CLA. And then we're gonna determine what the costs are for the storm ditches. For roughly $1,000 per dam, that dam that goes in, roughly the cost for maintenance and installation. And the last, we're blessed with having a lot of institutions, academic institutions in central New York. And to not take advantage of that would have been a shame. So we partnered with ESF and said, hey, we're here, we're available. We'll help you do the testing, we'll give you the lake to do it. They've done boat studies where they're looking at optical brighteners, septic leaching. We did that in 21 and 22. We want to revisit that again this year as part of the septic inspection programs. The HAB monitoring through the microscope that we use to speed up the process to identify if there is an algae bloom in the lake has worked well since 2020. We've done temperature study and also dissolved oxygen in the lake, that big yellow buoy that was out there for a couple of years, documenting that. And we've done some other work with some experimental equipment looking at algae blooms in the lake and seeing if they'll be a predictor for habitat growth. It's unproven now, but it shows some promise. We had 6 locations on the lake that did that over a couple-year period. And then everybody's aware of the field that's going in. And we said, you know what, we've got to be diligent and stewards of the lake. So we said, let's start doing zinc, not cobalt, the cadmium, lead, and PA hydrocarbons to leach out of it. So we did a baseline in 22 before the installations. We did one halfway through the process, and we just completed our last round of testing after the field was totally installed. We'll have those results back probably in another week or two, and hopefully we'll find some good results that the filtration systems are working well. That's our hope. That would be an ideal situation. And we'll continue that going forward, just to be diligent about it as well. We'll talk more about the fish studies. We partnered with Morrisville on that. It used to be Cass College, now it's Morrisville. And then lastly, Cornell and UFI, they do all our analytical work and have done a nice job for us for the last 5 years. So that's it for my end.
Good morning. Bill Snyder from SUNY Mooresville. It's nice to be back here again. We've had a really great year sampling. I was able to get 2 labs out for daytime electroshocking, and we did go out one evening, one nighttime shock. I think it lasted a little bit longer than people intended, but it was very profitable. We heard a lot of great jokes from Jimmy, and I had to keep Sandy from kissing the white sucker we got. But it did go quite well. Probably most of you were here last year when I presented, and last year's data, you know, I found amazing, almost a little unbelievable. And if anything, this year's data just reinforced that with me. I think I missed a slide in there.
Bill, could you just briefly go over what the electric shock boat does?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The electroshock boat is a boat that was acquired through Thad York's immense effort. It was obtained partially on a grant. I believe there were some funds from Cass College, a lot of funds from the Cass Lake Association, and then Madison County Planning Department. It is currently technically owned by Madison County Planning Department. That's who is holding the registration for it. We are making arrangements. I've sort of commandeered a building at Morrisville so that we will have a secure inside storage for it there. It is a 22-foot aluminum boat. There are 2 long booms which go out the front, and then spiders or umbrellas that have electrodes which hang in the water. And it provides current. We're putting usually around 200 volts at about 4 kilowatts of power in, and this will just stun the fish. And when they get stunned, they roll so you see the white belly and you can net them up. Of all the fish sampling techniques, this is actually the least damaging, the least harmful to the fish. And if you're doing it right, you will have absolutely zero mortality from it. Sampling with my 2 labs that are during the daytime when when I have my labs and I can get my students there, the most effective time to sample is at night. Just the fish will be shallower, and we have really bright LED lights on the boat. And I'm trying to think who all was there. It was Sandy, Jimmy, I'm sorry.
And Dan.
Yeah.
Dad and Dan.
And Dad.
And Dan and Pat and somebody else.
Sandy's nice.
But anyway, they'll attest to Dan will attest to the incredible numbers. I think some of them never want to see a bluegill again. But I was excited for it. One of the situations about the nighttime shocking is that during the day we get predominantly the bass, because they're the bosses, they run things, and they'll hang out wherever they want. And Thad has heard me go on. Who attest has heard me gone on for the 2 years that I've been on the lake, where the prey fish, we're not seeing prey fish. Well, the prey fish want to stay low in the vegetation during the day so they don't get eaten. At night they're more comfortable, and that's where they came up. And this year, I got the prey fish. I was able to see them. So this was this year's sample of the 3 shock trips. We did get 90 fish out of it, 90 bass. And our largest was around 500, was a little over 500 millimeter, about, think of 20, 21 inch fish. That bass, our largest bass, was about 5 1/4 pounds. It was an appreciable fish. The one thing that I saw in here, and these were the young of the year, the youngest ones that were hatched this year. This were last year's hatch. These are much older fish. I saw a gap here. Oh, we can touch on that in a moment. What I've been doing is I have taken all the fall data. I don't want to use data throughout the year. I'm only looking at fall data so that all the fish have been growing, had the same growth time. Caz is a very stable lake, so I'm assuming a steady state. So I'm not really, comparing apples to oranges here, okay? So I have accumulated it, and this is data that goes back to 2012, which Thad and his students were collecting, up through the 23-24 data that Thad, me, and my students have collected. So, again, you're seeing the 1, 2, we get 3-year-old in here. Now, in fisheries management, the big thing we're interested in is something called recruitment. Do we have betas which are growing into the mature, reproducing size, and then adults? So we have the largemouth bass, we have what we call stock, and that's around 8 inches. A lot of people don't believe it, but largemouth will spawn for the first time once they hit 8 inches. Reproduction in fish is more size related than it is age related. So the fact that you're getting 3-year-old fish that are spawning, that's great. I've seen ponds that it takes them 4 years to hit that. So that's really good, but even through historical data, these numbers are low. Stock 12 inches are what we consider, when are they first harvestable? That's the traditional size that people consider. But then we go and we also, that's supposed to be quality, and I'm old. I'll blame my work study for this. But these are quality, and this is what's called preferred. 15 inches is your preferred size. People really don't feel like they've caught a nice bass till it hits 15 inches. Most lakes, well, a lot of farm ponds and smaller privately owned ponds and stuff, you'll get a lot of stock and not many up here, because once they hit about 12 inches, people are harvesting. A lot of open state lakes are like that. You know, they have the 12 inch, once they hit length limit, they are out of there. So to see a really healthy stock population and an appreciable preferred population in there is amazing. You guys have one heck of a bass fishery out here. I've thought about this, and you know, this is a lot of guesswork and assumption on my part, but you're in a really rare situation that with the limited access on the lake, but also, you know, limited access for the people that have the opportunity to really present heavy harvest on the bass. And this fishery, the largemouth bass fishery on this lake, is overwhelmingly a catch and release fishery. You know, the locals that are fishing it, I don't believe, you know, we haven't done a creel census survey. This is something I'd like to see, but the locals probably aren't harvesting much. And I've talked to probably 6 or 8 boatloads of people out of Pennsylvania who are the serious bass fishermen up here, and they have no interest in harvesting. So to see a bass fishery with very low or no harvest is exceptionally rare. And this is being reflected by this large number. The downside is you start stockpiling a lot of fish up here and your prey base can suffer. You know, you start getting a lot of really big hungry fish and then you can't feed them. So we look at something called relative weight. A lot of research went into coming up with a formula for what is an ideal weight, not an average weight for bass, but what's an ideal weight for bass. You know, if you have a 15-inch bass, how heavy should that be to please fishermen and all? And our target, so you take their actual weight, divide it by their standard weight, their ideal weight, multiply by 100 and get a percentage. Here's our target window, right there. We can see 80 or 100%. I'm used to seeing 60 to 80. I mean, just, you know, the ponds, the lakes I've looked at over the past 40 years, this is where you are. And you can see that you've got, I mean, you're probably averaging well above 100%. I want to point out, don't get upset down here, because those are the little bitties, okay? You take a fish that weighs 3 grams, and if your scale is plus or minus 1 gram. So we always get that trumpet pattern. The technical term for the bass that you have, okay? The technical term we use in the fisheries trade are chunks. I mean, Dad's been out on the boat with me. Some of the others have been out on the boat with me. I am amazed. Their girth is tremendous. These are well-fed fish. They have no problem. Hang on. Come on, this thing doesn't like me. Is this a Mac or something? Okay. So I went and I pulled out the bluegill and the pumpkin seed. Blue is bluegill, orange is pumpkin seed, just to see their lengths. And again, we have stock at about 3 inches when they start to breed. Most people, wouldn't consider harvesting to about 6 inches. So we want to see, what proportion of the fish do we have that are greater than 6 inches? Again, preferred, people aren't really going to look at it and say, that's a nice bluegill, till it hits about 8 inches. And the proportional stock density came out to 81. Just keep that in mind. And I do want to point out, we got this one 11.5-inch bluegill. I mean, it had to be probably the biggest bluegill I have ever had my hands on. I mean, you guys, I'm impressed. Now, ideally, we look at how many fish, we take the total number of fish that are over breeding size, and then how many of those are in that quality range. We like to get our prey fish between about 20 and 40%. So, we want around a third of our prey fish into that quality range. We like about 50% of our largemouth in that. And we're up here. This is a quadrant we call the balance of nature. And this is where you have a population dominated by older, big fish, but yet we're still getting good reproduction coming in. I've never seen this. I mean, it came, I landed there last year on the data, but, I wasn't sure, I didn't have that much data. This lake, to me, it's phenomenal. I mean, I am just really impressed. I don't know what to say. Now, a couple things. The biggest thing that I'm curious about is this gap. We're missing these stock sub-quality bass. You can see that gap in the data. Could be one of two things. Either they're not there or we haven't sampled in a manner to get them. Right now I'm leaning towards the fact that it's probably a sampling artifact. Bass in that range often are actually a little more open water. They move out. These bass are in heavy vegetation feeding on small things. These bass are up in the typical bass habitat feeding on the big things. These get pushed out and are in more marginal, a little bit more open water. I don't know, I'm guessing at that point. But to get some targeted sampling, of that, would be interested, and I would like to do that. So where I'm at now, on this limited, is that largemouth bass and sunfish populations appear exceptionally healthy. PSDs are exceptionally high. And that just tells me low harvest pressure. Like I said, you guys have an incredibly rare, dedicated catch and release fishery. I want to know where those substock largemouth are, and need to do a little more target. I wasn't getting the small bluegills and pumpkin seeds. I'm not saying they're not there, but I need to do targeted for that. And then also, I want to know what else is there. Possibly do some stomach content analysis on the bass, some targeted. I'd like to use some gill nets next summer with really small mesh, so I would not catch any large fish, but I don't understand why there's not golden shiners. We've got some big golden shiners out there, but I haven't seen the schools of small golden shiners. You got vegetation, you have breeding golden shiners, you have tons of Daphne. I did some plankton toads for the water fleas. You have tons of that. And that would be a good, that is superb food for the bass too. So, it's my heavy fingers. So I'd like to do some more comprehensive sampling throughout the summer, getting the summer when fish are more available, more night sampling, and really try to fill out the fish community with the smaller fish and the smaller species, possibly stomach content analysis, take some time or just get an intern, a technician to do some age and growth so that we can look at scales and really figure out what's going on there. But the big thing I'd like to do is at Morrisville, our bachelor graduates have to complete a 12 or 15 credit hour internship. So I would like to try to get one of my students interested that this next summer, they could sample throughout the summer, possibly reach out to the other universities and institutes that are doing work, consolidate data, but do much more comprehensive fishery sampling to really compile an overall community and ecosystem study on the lake.
So this next thing we have to do, Emmett, unfortunately, he's kind of our specialist hydrologist on the lake. He's helping very well on the Mill Street Dam removal project. He unfortunately got COVID a couple days ago, so he had to record his presentation. I'm going to do my best here to make it work. Come on. Guiding spot.
Sorry.
Really?
You knew it was gonna happen, right?
Morning. This presentation describes our project to investigate the removal of the Mill Street Dam on Chittenango Creek located in the village of Cazenovia. To understand why, we need to review some history. In 1825, the Erie Canal opens, and I've shown a cross-section of the canal here, its depth and width. And berm on one side of the channel, towpath on the other side where the mules walked along to pull the canal boats. This canal was an immediate success. And within 10 years, the state approved funding to enlarge the canal to a depth of 7 feet, width of 70 feet. And during that period of enlargement, 2 dams were constructed in the village of Cazenovia, associated with the Erie Canal, Mill Street Dam and Lake Dam. In 1920, the old Erie Canal was abandoned and replaced by the new barge canal. Throughout the period of operation of the old Erie Canal, a problem was the lack of navigable depth in the channel due to loss of water. And the construction of these 2 dams in Cazenovia was meant to address that problem, as we'll see in a few minutes. This shows the situation outside the village of Chittenango, where Chittenango Creek flows down from Cazenovia underneath the Erie Canal through an aqueduct and out to Oneida Lake. Facilities were constructed to divert water from streams into the canal to make up for this loss of water from the canal channel itself. And in Chittenango, a dam and gate were constructed upstream on Chittenango Creek to take some of the flow out of the creek channel, to divert it into a feeder channel which led directly to the canal to act as a source of water. Now, this system worked well as long as there's enough flow of water in the creek coming down from Cazenovia, and was the case when in the months when there was in the springtime generally, but in the summertime that there often was not enough water, and that problem was addressed by the construction of the dams. So we'll move upstream now to the village of Cazenovia and look at the 3 channel sections here. One is the lake outlet channel that leads from, that goes from Cazenovia Lake to Chittenango Creek. There's the upper channel of Chittenango Creek, which meets the lake outlet channel, and flows downstream to the lower creek. The first of the 2 dams, the Mill Street Dam, was built adjacent to Mill Street on lower Chittenango Creek after the upper creek and lake outlet channel merged. The other dam, the Lake Dam, was constructed on the lake outlet channel. And these 2 dams are currently owned and operated by the New York State Canal Corporation. So let's look at how these were operated in order to provide water to the canal in the 19th century. In spring operations, or more generally when there's high flow in upper Chittenango Creek, a portion of that upper Chittenango Creek flow is diverted into the outlet channel and into Cazenovia Lake, essentially to store water during these periods when when creek flow was high. During subsequent periods when the creek flow was low, the dams were adjusted so that water flowed out of Cazenovia Lake and merged with the flow from upper Chittenango Creek to flow down towards Chittenango and ultimately to the Erie Canal. So that release from the lake augments the natural flow of the creek for water diverted to the canal downstream. So this lists all of the reservoirs and feeder systems that existed along the Erie Canal in 1862 to provide water to the canal channel. One of those is Cazenovia Lake, and that its role as a reservoir, as I just described, is indicated here in the name that's applied to it. All right, now let's look at present conditions. That from 1920 to the present. In 1920, the Erie Canal the old Erie Canal was abandoned and closed. The Mill Street Dam no longer serves any useful purpose. The Upper Lake Dam is used only to control the lake level. And when the Upper Creek flow is high, backflow conditions, as shown here, still persist. And backflow indicates that water is moving from Chittenango Creek into Cazenovia Lake through the lake outlet channel. And there's good reason to believe that this backflow is due to the presence of the Mill Street Dam. So now let's look at some watershed areas. Here's Cazenovia Lake itself with a surface area of 1.8 square miles. The lake has a watershed of 8.7 square miles. That watershed surrounds the lake. The sum of those two is the watershed area at the outlet of the lake. Then if we move to the south and look at the upper Chittenango Creek watershed, that has an area of 36 square miles and extends down to New Woodstock and Erieville, and as shown here includes the Erieville Reservoir. Those two stream channels merge, the lake outlet channel, Chittenango Creek upper watershed merge, and the water flows through the Mill Street Dam site, and the watershed area is just the sum of those two. If we move all the way downstream to Chittenango and to the Erie Canal, we have a larger watershed area. So let's look at some conditions in the lake outlet channel. And this is a picture of the lake dam looking from the one side of the channel at the dam itself. And this is under a low flow condition. There's no water flowing over the dam. There's a small amount of water flowing from Cazenovia Lake toward Chittenango Creek through the gates that are in the lower right-hand corner of this picture, but this is a low flow condition. Here's a photograph of a high flow condition where both the lake and the creek are higher than in the previous slide. The high elevation of the lake is causing the water to flow out of the lake and over the top of the spillway as shown here. The creek is also higher, but it's not high enough. It's not high enough to cause a backflow. So this occurred on May 2nd of 2023. If we look at conditions on December 18th of last year, now both the lake and the creek are high in elevation due to rainfall and runoff, but the creek is substantially higher than the lake. And that is causing water to flow from the creek into the lake, as shown here. And so this is what we call a backflow condition. That flow extends out into the lake. This shows a drone photograph of a backflow event that occurred in July of 2021. And you can see this turbid water flowing out of the lake outlet channel on the right-hand side of Lakeland Park. And this is obviously showing some impact of this backflow into the lake on lake water quality. Okay, let's talk about these watershed areas again. Obviously, the lake watershed itself has some impact on water quality in the lake. All of the streams in that watershed flow directly into the lake. But in addition, with the occurrence of backflow, lake water quality is also affected by conditions in the larger upper Chittenango Creek watershed, because that's the source of the water that contributes to the backflow. Sampling of Chittenango Creek and of streams in the lake watershed indicate that the upper creek is enriched in phosphorus and suspended solids relative to streams in the lake watershed. So that makes this backflow of concern. We would like to reduce or eliminate this backflow to reduce or eliminate that impact of the upper creek on lake water quality. And the only way, or certainly the most direct way to address that backflow is to remove the Mill Street Dam. So here's a list of positives and negatives. Why remove the dam? As we just discussed, to reduce or eliminate backflow, a significant source of pollutants to the lake. The second point is to simplify watershed protection. If the backflow can be reduced or eliminated, that would reduce the importance of the 36 square mile watershed of the Upper Creek and would result in our being able to focus watershed protection efforts on the 8.7 square mile lake watershed. Another advantage of removing the dam is it would lead to stream restoration and beautification, restore fish passage due to the removal of the dam, improve the health and diversity of the fishery. There's the potential for enhancement of recreational activity in the creek, and it would also relieve the Canal Corporation, the Lake Association, and the village of the responsibility and cost of operating and maintaining this dam. One and probably the only reason, or we believe is the only reason that we should consider keeping the dam, is that it does provide flood attenuation in the channel of Chittenango Creek downstream of the dam. The magnitude of that flood attenuation is something that needs to be investigated, and it will be investigated in the study that is currently being undertaken by Gomez and Sullivan engineers, who have signed a contract with the village to evaluate the removal of the dam. And listed here are the four major components of their study. First, to develop
They use mostly though.
more dams of the mill. In the study that is currently being undertaken by Gomez and Sullivan engineers, who have signed a contract with the village to evaluate the removal of the dam. And listed here are the four major components of their study. First, to develop a model to evaluate the impacts of dam removal on the backflow of water into Cazenovia Lake and on flooding downstream of the dam site along the channel of Lower Chittenango Creek. Secondly, to identify permits and approvals from regulatory agencies that would be required in order to actually carry out the removal of the dam. Third, to develop a preliminary plan for habitat restoration and improvement between the two dams. And lastly, to develop a preliminary plan for recreational enhancements between the two dams. So this is the first phase of this study. Gomez and Sullivan has been making good progress over
over this year. We expect to receive the final recommendations and results of their analysis in the coming weeks. And we are planning to hold a public meeting specifically to describe those findings and to describe how the village wants to proceed moving forward. That public meeting will be advertised, and so all of you here today will have the opportunity to attend that meeting. That concludes my presentation, and I thank you.
Be patient with that. So I want to talk about the wetlands situation, which I know many of you are aware of. And before I start, I just want to say thank you to everybody who read the emails. I know we blasted out a lot of emails, but time was of the essence of this. So thank you for everybody who supported and responded. And I'm going to give you an update on this all. And I'll be pretty quick because there's been a lot of information shared. But first thing I would start with is we're not opposed. Lake Association is not opposed to safeguarding wetlands. We believe in wetlands. We understand their importance to all watersheds and to all water quality. The problem we have is that the way they are currently defining a wetland, in our opinion, it's not a valid way to define a wetland, and we have others who agree with us. Our belief is that if a lake should be left a lake, if it's navigable by boats, that lake should be maintained as a lake, not defined as a wetland. So therefore, we're in favor of modifying the existing law to exempt navigable waterways. What the wetland law does is it does enables the DEC, by law, if you read the law, to dictate that large portions of the shoreline of Cazenovia Lake in the water is actually a wetland. And that is based on the vegetation they list. So basically, if you read the law, it says, if there's one or any of these submersible plants, milfoil, pondweed, I mean, those are the two, right? Right off the bat, we all know we have. If water contains that area of water can be declared a wetland. The problem is that we currently have 26 of these 33 plants they have identified, and if you go around our lake, it's there. It's in most of the places. The reason why we say this up here is because we've talked to people at Cornell, and their opinion is that the wetland regulation is it's incomplete as it's written. They didn't consider the important elements of a wetlands, things like turbidity, how it stops water from coming into another body of water. It doesn't consider animals that are critical in a wetland. So just listing a wetland based on a type of plant is an incomplete definition of a wetland. Just so people know, we have declared wetlands up in the North Bay as on the input channel. We would never say that should not be declared a wetland, because if you look at it, it's a wetland, right? It's going to contain animals, plants, habitat, which is significantly different than the majority of the shoreline of Cazenovia Lake. So, these are our concerns with the update, and these can be the potential effects of what can happen to us. We do a lot of, us together, everybody in this room in the town villas, we do a lot of management of this lake, and we feel like we feel like we're doing a progressive job in terms of being able to manage the lake, keep it usable for people. You know, as Bill Snyder said, the fishing's good. It's a great lake. The new maps that they're coming out with, maps are in quotes. Cornell is putting these together by December 1st. They're not going to be hard to find maps anymore. So today you can go and you can look and you can say, okay, this area is a wetland, and therefore it will be regulated as a wetland. Now what's happening is that Cornell's going to come up with recommendations. They will have a map, but it's just a recommendation. The DEC can do whatever they want to. They don't have to sit there and look at that area and say, yep, that's a wetland. They can go someplace and say, yeah, it's not on Cornell's mapping, but our opinion is that that's a wetland. The big thing is this. At the edge of a wetland, So let's say a wetland at my house, it's the shoreline, it goes 100 feet beyond, you know, you take a circle around that 100-foot border, and that's all wetland. So if you have lakefront property, 100 feet of your property will now become a wetland, which will then require you to get extra regulatory burden on if you want to do anything with that. The town and the village have really good processes in place for currently managing that, and we don't believe that more is needed to be regulated in that area at this point. And I'll be honest with you, if my area was a wetland, you know, it really was, I'd say, yeah, okay, regulate it as such. But, you know, when you have a bank and it comes up and there's trees and trees and trees, it's not wetland. So, of course, it will require extra costs for people, which, you know, it's just, and the biggest thing is extra regulatory burden. The village already has, already been delayed on some projects down at their area. You know, Lauren and Tom can talk more about this, but they want to do a Lakeland Park revitalization. We don't know how this could affect that if they declare that area a wetland. You know, we want to improve the beach, we want to improve the area, we don't know what that's going to mean. This is a big one, right? Property values in the entire town and village will potentially decrease. If you start decreasing the value of Cazenovia Lake as a desirable location, it's going to ripple through the whole community, right? I mean, personal story, I moved to Cazenovia because obviously I love the lake and fishing, and you know, it was attractive. If you remove that as a lake being really critical to the town, you're going to just decrease the value of the whole town. And if services are to remain the same, so property values go down, your taxes would go down, which is a good thing. However, if you want the same services, taxes will have to be raised back up. And it's not just the town and village of Cazenovia. The school system goes into other towns. They're affected also. So it's kind of a wide-reaching concern that we have for this. Bob Crichton, kudos to him. He put together this, just an example of where we know there are these weeds in the lake that are along these shorelines. And these are just 3 areas that he picked out. And then this red line is the line that's 100 feet back. So that means if you take, you know, the Lakeland Park area, right, where the village wants to do some work, you know, that's pushing back up to that circle. And now for them to do anything there, and it's a village-owned property, they have to go through DEC approval, and we don't know what the DEC is going to say. We have no idea. They could say, nope, you cannot improve your beach. Nope, you cannot improve that pavilion or the what's it called? Yeah. Or the pavilion itself. So this is just one area. Clearly, it's probably 90% of the lake could potentially be affected. I'm not saying it is, but so what we've done, extensive letter writing campaign. Again, thank you for everybody who supported that and wrote letters. The good thing is we got CSLAP involved, town, village, watershed council. We all wrote individual letters as organizations. We were told to do that by the DEC rep. We do know this for a fact, that change to the law to exempt navigable waterways, it's not gonna happen. Not now. May in the future, but not now. We've met with our state senator. He's in favor of it. We met with our state assemblyman. He is not in favor of it, and he told us directly it's not gonna pass. So this year it's not gonna pass. So what does this mean? Well, I'll get to that to the next slide. We have had lots of discussions with the head of our DEC region. She came to one of our Lake Association meetings. She gave us that everything's fine, nothing's gonna be affected, et cetera, take it for what it means. We do not know what portions will be effective, and even if this year nothing's affected, which I kind of don't think it will be, my gut tells me we'll be able to still harvest and to treat with Priscilla. That's my belief today. The scary part, and we brought this up to them, is, well, what happens when you leave, right? What happens when new DEC leadership comes in and they see this law and they say, hey, I'm interpreting this differently, and yeah, I know about what you're doing, but I wanna, we're gonna declare you a wetland. Like I said before, Cornell's coming up with these recommendations December 1st, so we should know pretty soon Again, I don't know, my guess is we're probably not gonna be on that initially, but I don't know. They won't tell us. We do know, however, this, so here's an important point. Chautauqua Lake, it's a very big lake near Buffalo, Erie, or Erie. Their South Basin, which, I think Bob Craig, you were telling me it's much bigger than our North Bay. It's a very large basin. They've already been told by the DEC, it's about a 10-foot deep area, has lots of plants in it. They've already been told the whole area is gonna be a wetland. And if you look at the picture, it has grass growing right up to the shoreline there, and then trees. So it doesn't matter. They said that whole area is gonna be a wetland. So we know there's precedent that's already been verbally told them, so it's real. So what are we doing our path forward? Like I said, through our letter writing and communications, we've told them about our lake management plans. We've told them all the things we're doing. And I do think that's helped because they now understand that we're not just letting things go and letting things be in a poor condition. We have to wait to see what Cornell's recommendations are. At the end of the day, we have to keep the pressure on our legislators to get this law changed to exempt navigable waterways. That's the only safeguard long-term for us.
Dave, did I understand you correctly? You said that or something of Mr. Surtees is against this,
That's correct.
against this update for the navigable.
So let me be very clear.
Yeah.
He did not say he is personally against it. When we met with them, and Bob Creighton, correct me if I'm wrong, or Kyle, he said that the law will not be passed, and we do not believe, we want to just try this, we do not believe that it's needed to exempt navigable waterways. He said we, so. That's the thing, we need somebody on the assembly side to sponsor this law, okay? We do have somebody that is actually in Chautauqua, but he's retiring. Ideally, we need a Democrat because they have the majority. That's what we don't have right now. So I don't want to talk politics here, but that's the reality of it, right? This whole thing is a political issue because the politicians write the laws. So if we could get momentum behind that side of things, we would stand a much better chance.
Did
Yes.
he say why he doesn't think it'll pass? Is it not enough support across the way?
Kyle, what's your memory of that? He didn't say why that I remember.
I mean, usually if they don't think they have the votes, they don't want to stick their neck out.
And I think this was an initiative from above as well, that this was something that wasn't changed from mid-70s, and they haven't been following through, and this was something that they wanted to push through to protect, because while we are the exception, I think a lot of the other issues come from the other lakes that are, this might be actually benefiting the treatment of those and management of those, where we have gone above and beyond, and hats off to so many people in this room. But one thing Dave may not have mentioned, but designating our lake as a critical environmental area, that was something that was actually passed by the state as well. So that's another level of protection that follows all the tributaries, the way that we have to manage all of our zoning and planning as well, and we're just at a much higher level that we are doing an excellent job in this. If you just went to that model, I think we'd all continue to step backwards.
Yeah. And that's a good point about the critical environmental area. That, again, plays in our favor, and that's why my gut kind of tells me that we'll be okay at this initial round of things. It's really the future that's more unknown, and so that's what we're trying to protect against. One thing that was on the slide that I didn't mention, and so this is important, is that people, we wish that we would have 100% participation in people going to the town planning boards to get permits where required, and we know that doesn't happen. What I'm afraid of is that this is a demotivating factor potentially for people to go, because if, let's say my property is deemed a wetland, it's gonna, we're gonna go to the planning board and they're gonna say, well, this is a DEC wetland area and therefore you're gonna have to get a DEC permit. It's a demotivating factor now for people to go to the planning board, and that's a fight we're always battling, which we have rules. Planning board is doing their job with respect to enforcing the rules. We have good rules in place. We don't wanna demotivate people to do the right thing. And that's one of our concerns, is that this may be a demotivating factor.
Quick question,
Yes,
is this, new wetlands law just New York State level, or is this national?
New York State.
Okay.
And Kyle hit on one more thing, it is coming from above. Governor Hochul she's been the champion of it, and I think that's why there's some hesitation at the lower levels of the Assembly and the Senate support, because they may be afraid it gets up there and it just gets vetoed. So, yes.
Could you just say a little bit more about why Hochul is behind it, not politics? I just need, where's the motivation with this? What's the background of it?
The background is we currently have roughly 1 million acres of defined wetlands. They wanna increase that to 2 million.
Why?
It hadn't been updated since the 70s, like Kyle pointed out. And so it really did need to be updated. I think that the law just seems very incomplete.
Right.
And not defined very well.
Not to appear too bitterly cynical, I am a proponent of course I'm a proponent of wetland protection, but a lot of this looks like a pretty broad brush stroke to be able to show great environmental concern and garner votes. I'm sorry, but I see a lot more political action in this than practical resource management action.
Yes.
I wonder if you could clarify your position on navigable waters. Is your position that if you can't float a boat in it, it shouldn't be regulated? Seemed like that's what you were saying. In other words, if you have a swampland, say, right now, or if you plan to do something that would cause, like, filling in low-lying areas, that shouldn't be regulated. Is that your position?
Opposite.
No, it's the
No,
opposite.
that should be.
It should be regulated.
So even swampy areas in front of your property should be regulated?
Yeah, if it's truly if I can't drive my boat in and out of it, and it meets other criteria than just what the plant is below it, right?
Well, change the definition of what plants are protected or not. I mean, if your problem is that milfoil can't be treated, then just make an exception in the law for that. That seems like the way to solve the problem. Your solution seems to be, oh, well, we just won't regulate anything.
No,
That's
where
not
you
our
are.
solution.
No,
at
that's
all.
not our solution. There's a defined list of so many navigable waterways in New York State. There's a list, you can look it up. And our solution is saying, look, if you're a navigable waterway, you should be exempt from it. However, that does not exclude all areas of the lake. So that's, like I said, our lake in the north end at the inlet, that's clearly a wetland, right? You can go to a motorboat up to a certain point and then it's too shallow. And all of a sudden, the whole ecology changes. You can see the biodiversity changes. You have different plants, you have different animals, there's more frogs, there's more of these like different things. That's currently a wetland. We would never suggest to change that. You see, we would never. That should stay, it's a wetland and it should be a wetland. So the definition, you're spot on, the definition of what a wetland is, our opinion, it's just not correct, okay? They should be taking into things such as what type of animals are there, what type of, what depths are, and can you drive a boat there or not? You know, a motorboat.
It's incomplete the way the law is written now.
I don't mean to butt in.
That's okay.
Yeah, the wetlands laws came into place in the 1970s, but it's not like it has sat there static, during that time. There have been a lot of tweaks, just recently, there was, I don't know how long ago, 20 years ago or so, they expanded the minimum size of what would be considered a wetland. Now they've reduced the minimum. So there have been a lot of tweaks, and it's fairly comprehensive, and it covers a lot of things. There's things it doesn't do that needs to be fixed. The biggest issue that I'm seeing with this is, they wanna like push back this 100, I just feel there's too many issues. There's gonna be a lot more regulatory issues that are gonna come up. And, you know, they're sort of taking, well, we'll deal with them when we get to them. And again, I'm not expressing any distrust of Incon Reg, and I've been dealing with Incon Reg for 30 years, and it's gonna open a lot of black holes, and the major thing is just exactly what Dave said. There's a lot of people just, you know, they won't seek their building permits, they're gonna do what they wanna do anyway. But, you know, the law is just too vague, and it, you know, it's written too large right now. And again, that's coming from somebody who has spent their life, you know, fighting this war. So, you know, it's just not a 50-year-old law out of there. It's a current law that has been tweaked that we have now. And this is just too big of a Band-Aid.
You're right, the wetlands map, they were updated in the 80s, so while they do say that, I've heard that from them, that, oh, it was, you know, from 1976, it hasn't changed, that's actually not an accurate statement, so, yes.
Under current practices in the town, when a property on the lake seeks a site plan review, is there any consideration given to, this might be a wetland, we might need to contact DEC?
Yes, there is.
Yes.
Okay. It does, it currently.
Yeah, I mean, I have my property, it's my first 20 feet are very, and the town regulates what, 20 feet? My first 20 feet is very swampy, and it is, and so they didn't let me do anything, except, they did let me put, you know, a walkway out so I could get to the water. But other than that, I can't touch it.
And then
because
to
of
jump back to something you said earlier, in your meetings with the DEC, they're saying, we're not gonna change any of that.
That's what they're saying.
Okay.
That's what they're saying. Yeah, yes.
So I'm with a company called Water and Wetland, and I've managed Saratoga Lake, Cayuga Lake. So the big concern with this, and specific to you guys, is so say you're gonna do a Percelicore treatment, everything is letter of the law. The people you're interacting with have set guidelines. Once it gets kicked to a wetland, it's individual opinions, right? It's not, the wetland biologist doesn't have the set guideline. So you could have a lake for here, for example, where in this is region 6, the wetland biologist is on board with that. But then you go to region 4 and he could have a different mindset. So that's really where it's gonna come in to affect you guys, is that there's no more letter of the law to how you manage that. It's very subjective. So
That's a great point, and we've seen it with other regions, right? Right now, Chautauqua, their regional director, they said, yeah, you're a wetland. The woman, our regional director that we met with, Dareth, she said, we don't expect any changes to Cass Lake.
But they could say, you guys can't treat, you guys can't treat anymore.
right, and it goes even, Chautauqua Lake is all about fisheries. So I think it's like 70% of the littoral zone is a specific fisheries designated non-treatment area.
Oh, excuse me, why don't you start it?
Yeah.
This is important what he's saying, please.
So in Chautauqua Lake, for example, what's happened regulatory is they said, okay, we have these critical fish habitats, which is really good to say, but they have 60% of their littoral area is then said you can't do any management on. So when we're using Percelicore or a treatment like that, we can actually treat in the most problematic areas. We have to define our maps based on this subjective regulation that doesn't have any merit or doesn't have any real laws or guidelines.
So you're saying if the director in Buffalo were reassigned here, that director could say the north area of the lake you cannot treat?
Yes, they could do a fisheries biologist habitat assessment and then say, well, from now on, we want you to take into consideration this. I mean, and that could happen in other situations, but that's where the subjectivity comes into play. And it's not quite a science, right? Chautauqua Lake has a great fishery. They've been treating it for 7 years. Some of their limitations are rough on a management, especially an organization like you guys. I'm at this meeting because you guys are kind of the top tier of how do we manage lakes. So it doesn't, like you were pointing to, it doesn't have as much merit for you guys as some of those other lakes that maybe do need to improve on some things.
Yes.
So my biggest problem with the way this scheme has changed is the change in the statute that occurred in 2022, which our assemblyman did vote for, to remove the requirement for DEC to prepare maps. Maps are cut and dried, they're clear. If they change the maps, you get a notice if you're a landowner. You get notice that your land is going to be affected. With the situation now, without requiring DEC to prepare maps, they have 4,000 words that they use to define what a wetland is. And as people have pointed out, that's subject to subjective assessment by different people in different parts of the state. And I think this is just it's something that's going to really badly affect all landowners, the uncertainty, and it's going to affect the town. I think we've got a situation of
Cornell,
uncertainty.
you know, they are preparing maps. And then what's even weird is now the DEC says, well, there's gonna be these maps, but we may or may not follow them. It's gonna be our opinion whether or not we wanna follow them.
Exactly.
But knowing life, we'll probably initially just look at the map and say, okay, yeah, that's a wetland, because that's easy.
We can hope.
We can hope, but again, if you go by the definition of that law, and the way Cornell's doing this, is they're doing it all, they're determining this based on remote sensing. Maybe you know more about this than I do, but what we've been told is they do it by, satellite imagery. I don't know if they're using drones, I don't know. But if you look down at our lake, if they happen to pick a bad month, let's say it was, the first week in July when we had that pondweed and that skinny weed that we had a problem with last year, yeah, the shoreline looks nasty. And it's very easy to sit there and say, wow, 3/4 of this lake has all these weeds. If they came back, a month later, those weeds are gone, we would look fine. So it's just unknown, and nobody likes that uncertainty, and that's, and if the law was written, to your point, specifically and targeted, and honestly with some of Cornell's input in our opinion, it would have been a more proper definition of a wetland, and that's the big thing. Yes.
I don't mean to be cynical, but
Go ahead.
with all of the wetland destruction that's going to be going on with Micron, and you're saying they're going from 1 million to 2 million now acres of wetland that they want in the state, are we bearing the brunt of that? So they're losing all of that wetland up there, or having to relocate it. They have to find it somewhere. We're here. Does that have any relationship?
So, it's a great point. Hypothesis, we've thought as lakes as low-hanging fruit, because they're easy to find and see. But it's a good point, we don't know. That's never been said to us by anybody. No one's ever said that.
Probably not.
No.
Is that 1 million to 2 million figure just arbitrary, or is it?
We don't know. We don't know.
Sounds good, but there's more to it.
Yeah, we don't know.
Any other general questions out there, maybe other than the wetland stuff?
Sam, with the elimination of that dam, will that change the level of our lake different than the way it is now?
It shouldn't, because the other dam is really the dam that controls the
In the
level of the lake.
winter, my dock tends to come down onto the mud.
Sure. Yeah, it should not.
It's just a backwash.
Exactly.
Is there a plan to make bigger, brighter, better signage at Gypsy Bay and Lakeland in terms of, even if you're a kayaker, be careful what you're doing? Because you see people coming from all over launching, especially at Gypsy Bay, including fishermen that might have a bait bucket, even though they're in a kayak.
Kyle, you wanna handle Gypsy Bay?
Absolutely, we're always reevaluating the signage down there, especially as we work through this together, so. There's a few things that happened this summer that we're working on some signage already, and that's been part of our ongoing discussions of what we're gonna put down there for next year. So I think this is where it's a great collaboration with CLA and the village, and the DEC to that matter, with making sure we're educating people. We're gonna have a new opportunity coming to us early next year through the county that we're gonna work with to help reach more people, electronically, but to make sure that, the root of this invasive species issue, to make sure we can address it, people are aware of how we can prevent that.
We're still trying to tighten up Willowbank too. There's a gate that was put in this fall, that's gonna be part of that, to try to tighten that up.
Yes.
You mentioned that you were going to increase the amount of the chemical, the next time that was put in. Do you expect that to, add to the longevity of the, because last year the lake was really
Yeah.
weedy.
So this past summer, they did increase the concentration. They
And you
did.
expect that to maybe hold better?
Yeah, I asked that exact question to the applicator, and he said, the hope is yes. I mean, so,
Yeah.
that's all I can say, the hope is yes, that it will.
With treating the lake, and I know you are talking of a 3-year gap, but if we're only limited to how many acres can be treated per treatment year, is there a benefit to sticking with a 2-year cycle and making sure that the areas that are treated in 2024 are not treated in a 2-year cycle, but treat other areas? Would that not give better control of the milfoil?
Money.
Well,
One of the things that we're trying not to do is stress the community in terms of being able to fund this. And the contributors, the main contributors now are all of us, okay, the town, but that's it. The state doesn't contribute to this, nobody else does, okay? And so we're trying to make a balance between controlling the milfoil and not overburdening people giving money to this.
Money aside, you could treat every year?
We don't know. Yeah, we don't know that for sure, okay? We think we could probably treat every other year, but again, that's a DEC decision.
That's
All
what I
we can
thought.
do is apply and see if.
I thought the 3-year was established by DEC.
No.
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 But with the area
We could
is-
potentially treat every other year.
Yeah,
We
last year
did,
you said
we
that.
did with Renovate, try to treat hot spots at one point, okay? Where you're just doing a more localized treatment. And that didn't seem to be very effective, okay?
the Priscillacor is much more effective, from my perspective, what I've
Yes.
seen. And it just seems like, I'm not an aquatic gardener, but I garden at home.
Right.
And when weeds get out of control, like they did last year, when it was a 3rd year, it's very hard to get back what you had gained. So if there was a more frequent treatment that would help better
So what we're gonna
control.
try this time, okay, and you know, we're constantly evaluating that very issue, okay, but what we're gonna try to do this time is on that 3rd year, harvest a little bit more aggressively and see if that takes care of it. Okay.
What, to Sam's point, when we looked at his slide with all this, you know, densities of milfoil, the densities of milfoil last year were really, really close, in some cases lower than the densities of the second year of Renovate. The difference was last year, the harvesting amount that occurred. So if we harvest like we did in the second year of Renovate, if we had last year like we had previously, we probably wouldn't have had that difficult summer. And I know that's what the town is working on and they're planning for, and, you know, hopefully we won't have, the town won't have some things that happen which, you know, force them to pull off the harvester that happened
But
last
you
year.
may be right, but
Yeah,
it
you
is,
could be.
it is about funding.
Yeah.
So from an application company, by doing a larger treatment on that 3rd year, you're gonna get a lot more lake-wide effect. So one thing I remember when we did the Renovate treatments was off-target impacts, right? So as you permit to the DEC, you know, you say we're controlling it in this area, but when you're treating a bigger portion of the lake in year 3, you're seeing that residue throughout the lake a little more. Priscillacor is quick and a fast-acting thing, but you do still get the product movement. So you're going to get a better whole lake. So if you were gonna treat spot by spot by spot, it's not always as effective.
Well, it just seems like if, this in 2024, they treated the south end of the lake and certain areas in the north end, then in 2 years, instead of 3, treat the different areas. not
Yeah,
so much.
you could look at smaller areas and do that, but from a budgetary standpoint and looking at everything, having your third year large treatment is going to be your best dollar value. However, there are some places in year two that'll say, we know this bay's gonna get bad, so here's a couple little spots. So I mean, that's an option, but from a budgetary standpoint, you know, that becomes less effective overall.
Can you remind us again what it costs?
$200,000.
Right.
Yep, to treat 198 acres. You had a question?
Yeah, so, my name is Tim Kelly. I'm not making it political. I am running for state assembly this year. But to clarify this gentleman's, question about the million, square miles that they're working on for, or, the million acres that they're working on in New York State, that is all part of the provisions that were in CLCPA that went into effect in 2019. There's 5 or 6 major regulations that are affecting the DEC as they're working to fight climate change. There are a lot of things that they're not really looking at. It's more broad brushstroke. So that is something, if people get a chance to look into some of those regulations, it's quite interesting.
Thank you. Yes?
Just curious, when we run the harvester, does that potentially spread and make potentially more growth?
Again, milfoil is already everywhere where it can be, okay? And so, you know, it just regrows. It just starts, as soon as we stop treating, those weeds just come back again. So it probably does a little bit, but not significantly.
Okay, 'cause I was wondering, maybe it's a cost, why don't we just run both harvesters?
We've tried it.
We only have one harvester.
Oh, I thought-
Okay, yeah, we were selling the town is selling the other one.
I forget which year it was though, that we actually said, oh, it was 2016. We said, you know what? Let's just harvest aggressively. We're not gonna treat. Costs us too much money. And they could not keep up with it.
The side benefit to the harvester is that you remove a lot of nutrients every time you take some plants out. Instead of having to go to the bottom, you're actually extracting it out of the lake. And that's a big benefit as well, so.
And that's a great point, Bob. I'm glad you brought that up. So if you see the harvester out in September, there's a reason. We're trying to get that biomass out of the lake, so it just doesn't die and just create the next, you know, it's like, you know, doing your lawn. You leave the grass clippings on the lawn, it's good fertilizer.
If I could change subject, it's been asked Bill Snyder about bass fishing tournaments and the effect on size of bass and the bass population, and also introduction of invasive species by guys coming in with bait in their boat.
Did everybody hear this question about the impact of the tournaments? I don't know who all is coming in for the tournaments. You know, like I said, you know, in my presentation there, I was able to talk to 6 or 8 groups of fishermen from Pennsylvania, and I'll say that they are probably some of the most considerate fishermen coming in. They had no interest in harvest, and they were taking extremes. I could tell their boats were clean, and they were taking extreme measures. So as far as catch and release fishing, you're not, you know, as far as the tournament fishing, you're probably not seeing any more significant mortality there than you would from anybody else fishing it, or say the people coming in from Gypsy Bay who are fishing for harvest. And as long as the you know, the site inspections are conducted, you know, there would be no, you know, issue of there'd be no issue of no greater issue of introduction. But you know, that's a very small sample. But if I can throw one other thing in on about if they remove the mill dam, okay, that will, I hate to say eliminate, but greatly reduce the probability of Chittenango Creek getting high enough to overflow the lake dam, okay? And so that will remove, which was one of the points that Emmett brought up in his talk. And something I'd like to throw in there is that every year I'm seeing gobies higher and higher in Chittenango Creek. So, you know, it's doubt that they would make it over the mill dam, but, you know, by removing the mill dam, that would really almost eliminate the probability that anything that would be in the creek would have any chance of getting into the lake. So,
That's a good point. Let me just add real quick, to all the fishermen out there, please do not ever use gobies as a bait fish for fishing. Oneida Lake, they have been studying this for 8 years. There's a correlation, they're not sure why, but the recruitment of smallmouth bass, so smallmouth bass reproducing has gone to nothing. They find a lot of big bass, but not a lot of small bass, and it happens to be around the time that gobies were introduced into the lake.
gobies eat everything. I mean, this is like, the round goby is like one of the ultimate nightmares.
Yeah.
You know, they feed especially in riffles and reefs, places where walleye and smallmouth bass spawn. We know they feed on eggs. They spawn 6, 8, 9 times a summer. And one of my regular sampling spots is on Chittenango Creek at Bridgeport. And I'd have to look at my data, but 8 years ago or so, I went in there one summer, you know, on our sampling, and I got 2, that was the first 2 round gobies I got. And then the next year, there were dozens. I mean, gobies will be your worst nightmare.
Yeah, they'll kill the bass fish.
They
In
will
my opinion,
destroy.
based on what's happened on Oneida Lake, there was, at the Oneida Lake Association meeting I was at, they said that there were, someone threw out a number of 50,000 gobies per acre in the lake.
Without doubt.
It's phenomenal. They'll kill the
I
ecosystem.
think that was what I was trying to get at with my question here, is bass fishing tournaments just as a general rule. Would the likelihood of having introduction of some invasive species like gobies be increased with bass fishing?
I've never seen, and again, it depends on the people, but I've never seen a tournament fisherman using live bait. So I would say that, you know, and there's been a lot of fish that have been introduced widely. I mean, common carp got spread a lot because people were using for bait, goldfish, things like this. So, you know, I would say there's almost zero probability of a tournament fisherman introducing a nuisance fish species. Your greatest concern would be the entry points like Gypsy Bay. Just saying.
One more and then I think we'll wrap it up.
You can talk afterwards, yeah.
Talking about fishermen, I grew up fishing, love the sport, but do I need a special permit to put signs up around my docks that say swimming area, no fishing, please? Because I've pulled more fishing lines and more hooks off of my docks this summer than I can ever remember.
You can put them up.
You can put them up.
Good luck. Am I gonna get,
You
do I
can
have to
try.
file a permit through the DEC?
No, you can put them up, but
The fish wanna, you know, as soon as the water turns real warm, the fish wanna hide under those docks in the shade.
I have 2 docks and they come between the 2 docks, they're within 6 feet of my beachfront where the dogs and the grandkids swim. I don't want,
It's a state law, right, so.
yes.
Yeah.
It can't be regulated by the town, the village.
You can put up the signs, yeah.
They
Yeah,
can be
you
a
can
foot
put
away
up
from
the
your
sign.
dock.
Can you put up a swim line, like you do at the park or something? You know, they
can I put up
can
a
you put up a
buoy
swim-
line or
Yeah.
something? Yes. Well,
That's what I was wondering, with the buoys, you know, they would know not, they could cross it, but they'd be less likely to.
no, they wouldn't.
You have to just make sure
Yeah.
you're not
I
developing
just wondering if
liability.
you're allowed to do that.
Or if someone
yeah.
gets tangled in that, they come after you for setting the line, so that's a civil matter.
So to wrap it up, I'd like to just say from the CLA's perspective, thank you everybody for coming. I love to see the great turnout. We all do. We all love to see the great turnout. You know, and town and village, thanks for working together, and we really appreciate everyone's support. And tell your friends to come next year. You know, the more the merrier. So, thank you.
This is one if you could